Hello everyone, welcome to our Let's Play series of Shadowrun Dragonfall. This is Colonel RPG as usual, and I'm very happy that you're chose to join me today in between missions, talking to Glory. The last person that we need to talk to before talking to Paul. Glory's pallid face lights up at your approach. A genuine smile spreads across her lips. Edie, good to see you. You too, Glory. How are things with you? I think that is the... Let's go with that, and then ask about thoughts about the last run after. And she pauses for a moment, considering, you know what? I'm happy, actually. For the first time in a long time. I have you to thank for that. I think she came to terms with her own demons, is it, in a way, maybe, potentially? Are you, ready to tell me about that chrome you're sporting? I think I'm gonna ruin her happiness if I'm gonna ask that, but I'm gonna ask that. And she says, "Be patient, Edie. The explanation for that is coming." A look of unease flits across her face, and she says, I'm not sure that you're going to like it, though." Well, you needed time, and I gave you time. No, that's me asking that again. Wait, that's a different thing. Are you ready to talk about Feuerstel yet? Yeah, she looks troubled, more so than you've ever seen her before. Whatever memories she's dredging up must be exceedingly painful. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't been looking forward to this. But yeah, it's time. Edie, look, I'm about to tell you some things about myself that might change your opinion of me. It's entirely possible that you're going to hate me based on what's coming up next. I've accepted that. And if that's what happens, I sincerely believe that I deserve it. She looks you in the eye, her expression grim. So tell me, are you sure that you want to keep pushing forward with this? And we have two big options here. The middle one being a small one, spit it out already. Let's see, this is important to you, Glory, or this is important for you. And the last one, this is clearly causing you pain, and I can backtrack. Let's go with the first one. This is important for you, Glory. After everything we've been through, I think that we both know that. Whatever you have to tell me, I'm ready to listen. Thanks, Edie, she says. Thanks for being a friend. So, when we left off last time, I had just moved from the streets of Tübingen to the warm, inviting confines of Feuerstel. Marta and I were happy there for a little while, and Harrow embraced me as a long-lost daughter. I should probably take a moment to talk more about Harrow. He's going to be an important figure in this story. I don't know what his age was. He seemed old enough to be paternal, but young enough to hang with the kids on something like a peer level. Best guess, I'd say he was in his mid-20s. He was handsome and well-built, with a neatly trimmed beard and thick brown hair, and there was something else about him, something uncanny. Harrow had this charisma, this raw, magnetic attraction that just made people latch onto him. I saw it over and over. All it took was a few words and a pat on the shoulder, and Harrow would have a new convert. The other kids at the farm followed him around like lost puppies. As much as I loved Marta, and as much as I thought she loved me, we forgot all about one another when Harrow was around. All that we wanted was to be close to him, to be a part of his inner circle, and soon enough, we were. For a girl of 17, it was all terribly exciting. Harrow had these rules of living that he would teach us, rules about self-determination and importance of disobedience or disobedience. He claimed to have taught classes at the University of Berlin, which he painted as a mix between an earthly paradise and an anarchistic playground. That sounds like a redundant thing. He told us, she says, how Feuerstel would be the local point of, or the focal point of a new movement for the children of the fatherland. He told us that we were special. We ate it up, of course, we were kids. For those of us in the inner sanctum, Harrow would share even more. He had power the likes of which I had never seen. Not my father's drunken fists or my own childish experiments, but genuine, incredible power. He said that it came from the Horned God, an ancient deity that he venerated. He knew about my latent abilities right away, and he offered to teach me. Naturally, I accepted. So this description sounds a little bit like a cult. It's got a little bit of that, a little bit of that grooming aspect that cults have, and the rules and all that. It sounds a little bit like it. Of course, it's a cult about learning about to disobey, which isn't impossible because you can have the language of disobedience while being super obedient, which is how cults work. You have to be obedient, otherwise it's not a cult. Well, it's not the only thing, but anyway, the point is, it feels like it a little bit, and she's just not telling, either for dramatic effect, which is likely, but she's not telling the whole thing. For her to be saying like the rules of the importance of disobedience, just and us taking her on her word about that, it would sort of imply that it is not a cult, because it's she's saying that she learned about the importance of the disobedience, but I think she's just hiding the punchline for later. I've heard of the Horned God. My character can say his followers have a poor reputation, especially among women. She didn't talk about her companions. She talked only about her and Marta. I did get the impression that they were all women, though, but that might be just my own predispositions to my own imagination here, because I don't think she actually said it. But anyway, this Harrow is beginning to sound a lot like a cult leader. Yeah, that's yeah, that is that. I mean, I certainly can't blame her, but let's not go for the third line. Let's go with the second one. You're not wrong there, she says, but it gets a whole lot worse than that, as you'll soon see. Hang with me, Edie. Rough waters ahead. So, I became Harrow's apprentice. He taught me to channel magic and summon spirits. He taught me rituals and pagan traditions, Machiavellian philosophy and Nietzschean ethics. Above all, he taught me to connect with his horned god, and through it I learned power and arrogance, and it was all downhill from there. For the next few years, I lived at Furestel as Harrow's enforcer and right-hand girl. I was also his sometimes wife and concubine, but that was a distinction that I shared with all of the girls in the commune, including my beloved Marta. I came to learn that she had been his I came to learn that she had been his comma. There should be commas just to help, but it's all optional anyway. I came to learn that she had been his long before she met me, but by that point I didn't care. I'd embraced the rules of living. I was Harrow's creature through and through. I didn't ask questions, and I walked the path that was in front of me. Other fun facts about those years: I learned cruelty. I had power now, and my new idol encouraged me to use it. Harrow did the same. Any children who didn't pull their weight were subjected to my tender mercies, and I was anything but tender. I took what I wanted rather than asking for it. I liked it. It was fun. I also came to learn that Harrow's horned god was not the Eichenfurst worshipped by the throwback cults across Germany, which is probably a reference to pre-Roman cults, or I say cults, but really gods and whatnot, of Germany, maybe? I wouldn't know about them, but the subtext might be related to... I don't know. I don't know. I don't know enough about German folklore and Germany's history to know what this is all about. Anyway, I would have to look it up on Wikipedia, which is something that you, amazing viewer, can do. If you want to learn about that, I can't help you, unfortunately. She says, it was certainly a god with horns, but it came from an altogether different tradition. Care to hazard a guess? God with horns. Well, Satanism is a complicated and multifaceted umbrella term, effectively, but it comes to mind, especially in regards to the importance of disobedience, although that is not applicable to all forms of Satanism, as far as I know, anyway. The devil is... The devil. I actually don't know. I've read about why English says the devil like this and where the word comes from. I think it comes from the Hebrew, whereas the diablo from I'm trying to think from Spanish for sure. Diablo is Spanish, but in Portuguese as well. I'm trying to think if Italian does the same. most likely, yeah. I think that one comes from the Greek, but I am not 100% sure. Actually, let me check. I can't find info very easily, but I was confused about it coming from the Greek, though. Diablo comes from Latin, although it might have origins. But the distinction between demon and Diablo is two different things, and devil and demon are two different things as well in English, but not in all languages. In Spanish and Portuguese, for sure, demon is used as the noun rather than devil or Diablo. Although Diablo is also used as the noun, but it is interchangeable, which makes it an interesting word for the devil. Also, capitalize, if it's a god you're talking about, capitalize the freaking D. Yeah, let's ask that. In the magically active community, she says, we refer to it as the adversary. Oh yeah, I've heard of this. The adversary. Yeah, I've heard of this, but not in the context of the magically active community, of which I am not very familiar with. So, yeah, it's not a surprise. But yeah, same being, more or less. So my idol, she says, the ancient deity that was feeding me my power, was the antithesis of everything that is right and good. And you know what? I didn't care. That's not how that works. Unless, well, in the magically active community, it might be how that works, especially if they call it just the adversary. Because that sounds like the antithesis of what you want. But for Satanism, it isn't like that. It's different. It's complicated, but it also depends on what school we're talking about, school of Satanism. In our time together, Harrow and I committed more atrocities than I could count. At this point, I was onto all of his tricks. I knew that Feuerstel was nothing more than a honey trap, carefully designed to lure local children into my master's clutches. I knew that the kids who seemed resistant to Harrow's brainwashing techniques wound up fertilizing the garden. I knew that Harrow's entire manifesto was bullshit, and I knew that through it all. Harrow and the adversary were laughing because I was laughing right there beside them. I don't want to pin the blame for my decisions on anyone but me. That said, I would like to posit that my father's connection to the Kreuzritters might have helped play into my willingness to serve the adversary. In my warped, indoctrinated little brain, I equated the church with evil. So, the opposite of that, I figured, had to be, well, if not good, then at least not totally bad. But I was kidding myself, of course. My new deity was the very definition of bad. Serving it made me bad. End of story. Yeah, that's how a cult talks. That's how a cult talks. That god over there is the very definition of bad. It's inherently bad. And of course, you know, I believe that is the origin. Well, it's not the origin, obviously, but the common perception, the common Christian perception of the devil has its roots in late first millennium and early second millennium, and it has to, you know, the evolution of like the stories and canonic lore and all that sort of stuff. They're all rooted there, as far as I know. I don't know how it goes for a Jewish lore though, so I'm not 100% sure on that. But anyway, the point is, if you're gonna define, the thing is, what I mean is, it's very easy to get lost in the names, and the even the definition of paganism has to, which is itself an umbrella term, is related to the othering of other religions. Christianism does that a lot, but it's not the only religion that does that, obviously. But historically, it does that a lot, and a large part of its lore is served by bundling other religions together into a notion of what is bad. And obviously, in Christianism, the devil, I'm not sure what Lucifer, is that the name? Potentially, maybe. Yeah, Lucifer is the definition of bad, as in it's vice versa. It works vice versa, and the same works for Huawei, I believe. I'm trying to remember names here. But the same works for that, or Jehovah, I suppose, because, you know, Jehovah Witnesses are also Christian. And they don't say Yahweh, they say Jehovah. I'm not sure why. It all comes from the same origin, but, you know, names. The point is, if it works vice versa, and it's part of the dogma. It's not even, if it is a part of the dogma, it's just a religious belief, and in the sense that it's not a conclusion of the religious belief. If you say, I am of the religious belief that I don't know, the Earth was made in a year or something. Oh wait, let's make it tangible to Christianism. The Earth was made in a day. I think that's how it goes. Not everything in it was made in a day. Then that is your dogma, and that is part of your religion, but the conclusions that you draw from there are not necessarily your dogma. You can think of yourself, so if it was made in a day, then dinosaurs something, or then the suns or something. All those conclusions are not part of your dogma, and you can discuss that. And that's how a lot of religious beliefs are actually made, historically speaking, because scholars and priests and all these studied people throughout centuries have debated this sort of stuff, and they've been killed for this sort of stuff just because they say no, Jesus Christ were this sort of like I don't know the name of the thing, but the common depictions of Jesus in the cross, he's wearing a certain vestment, and that vestment is subject to canonic lore. There's a proper way of depicting that, and people who stuck to the old ways, they didn't get killed, as far as we know, anyway. But they did get sneered at, basically. It's complicated. Lore and canonical lore is long and varied. Has a long and varied history, and studying it is kind of interesting. I did a little bit of that when I was in university, and that's where a large part of my understanding of the evolution of Christianism in general comes from. But anyway, the point is, she's talking as she's talking as a Christian. I don't think I'm out of place in saying that. You know what I mean? Anyway, any Satanists in the audience might be able to elucidate me in the comments, but anyway, thank you if you do that. I can't excuse the choices that you made. Actually, I can. She was absolutely groomed and brainwashed, and also suffering from she was abused as a child, and then she was abused even further. All of her authority figures were wrong and bad, and she, like, it's not a matter of excusing her choices. It's complicated when you say it like this, because obviously she did a lot of bad things, but it can't be seen as a black and white issue. Like, she was the victim in many aspects of her life, and she was the victim of violence and abuse, mental abuse and physical abuse, and but at the same time, I mean, it's not for me to excuse her choices. I wasn't the victim of her choices, and also, I believe she didn't excuse her choices. She not only does not excuse her choices, but also she didn't, because she's not in the same place now. So something happened after that. I am gonna disagree with her, though. But yeah, something happened after that, because remember, this is the situation where she's using summoning magic and stuff like that, and now she's all decked out. So I disagree with you, Glory. I don't think any of this was your fault. Harrow is the one who deserves the blame. And what if she says, and what if he was indoctrinated into the service of the adversary when he was at my age? Would he not be at fault anymore either? Yeah, I don't really have a problem of serving the adversary here. It's what you do with the service that is the problem. Yeah, you can be indoctrinated into the service, no problem. It's the other things that are the issue. She shakes her head. No, Edie. Harrow certainly deserves some of the blame for what I became. Maybe even most of it, but personal responsibility has to come into the equation somewhere. Does it? Why? Where is it written? Why are you saying that? What is she actually making a moral stance, or is she telling me? Is she telling me something? Is there... What I mean is this textual or is this metatextual? Because the thing about personal responsibility is the word responsibility and how you interpret that word. There's on a just a textual sense, responsibility can mean, you know, you being responsible for something in the sense that you're responsible for your own well-being. Or I say that, but it's not the word. You know, you're responsible for your own, you know, wiping your butt if you are fortunate enough to be able to do that. But, you know, in the case of a fully able person and whatever, you're responsible for wiping your butt. That's your responsibility. But if you don't do that, well, it doesn't stop being your responsibility. It's there's a word it's a word that works for that, right? It's your responsibility. You can also be responsible for murdering somebody. If you murder somebody, then you're responsible for that. But it's a different sort of responsibility, right? And when it comes to personal responsibility, the word is twisted a lot of times, and is seen in a lot of different contexts. Usually, well, not usually, but sometimes in racist contexts, which might be where. It's not the metatext here, but it might be sort of where we're going here. Or because the thing is, I don't know what she's talking about here. Personal responsibility comes into the equation somewhere. Because if we're just looking at it from a textual perspective, or rather, if I'm being pedantic, I say, yes, it comes when you decide to not do that anymore. And then your personal responsibility came in there. Because that is literally what happens. You know what I mean? Like, if you grow up in an abusive family, and you grow up being a bully, and all you were taught was violence, and you dished violence out and hate and all that, and then, you know, where does personal responsibility come in this situation? I could say that the personal responsibility comes in when you decide to not be that person anymore. Then your personal responsibility came in there. But of course, if you're seeing this from the other perspective of what the word responsibility means, then you can already say that as soon as you're able to see the effects of your actions, there's a little bit of personal responsibility in there, even if you're a kid. And yeah, as soon as you're capable of empathize, like physically and emotionally capable of empathizing with the people that you're abusing, as a, you know, which is sort of more or less her example, then that's where the personal responsibility comes in, because that's the other style of responsibility. You know what I mean? But the thing is, this isn't a switch. It's never a switch. When you're the victim of abuse, it is. I mean, I am fortunate enough to not know this from personal experience, but I know it from hearing people talk about this. It's the toxic nature of abuse is it makes you feel responsible for the abuse that you're suffering. So whenever you see a victim of abuse or a victim of indoctrination, which is abuse, or anybody in this situation, whenever you see them blaming themselves, and even in things a lot more straightforward and clear cut than this, even people who are just, you know, punched. No, I say punched, but what is victims of assault, or it could be sexual assault as well. Just straightforward, clear harm against their body and physical well-being and even mental well-being. But even when it's like super clear cut, even then people see themselves as to blame. Like this, personal responsibility has to come somewhere. What kind of personal responsibility are we talking about here? Because it's so super easy for us to blame ourselves for our predicament, because that's also the society that we live in. But the thing is, blame, is it personal blame? I'm glad I finally arrived at the word. Is it personal blame that she's talking about? Or is it personal choice? That's what I'm saying here. It's complicated. And she's just saying it as a matter of fact. Personal responsibility has to come into the equation. I don't agree with that. Certainly when it comes to blame. On the blame of it, I am fundamentally opposed to that notion. No, blame does not have to be applied. In any case, but certainly not in this case. Blame is such a complicated subject because it's related to things like retribution and punishment, It's so complicated in our society anyway. It doesn't have to be like that. If you're looking at the word, what blame means, it doesn't have to be like that. But from a social perspective, it has. That is what it is related to. So whenever you're talking about blame, you're always necessarily talking of implied punishment, implied consequence. In the sense, consequence. Even the word consequence is contaminated with that nonsense. But the problem is, it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be like that, and you see that better when you're talking, like when you're working together as a group to make something. You're doing something productive. If you start playing the blame game, things just fall to crap because it's not productive. It doesn't work. It's bad. Don't play the blame game when you're like in a company working for a job or something. Like that's bad. Don't do that. It's important to understand the people who are actively harming the rest of the community, but when it comes to doing their best, then that's not what they are doing. They may be unwittingly harming the rest of the community, but that's something that can be worked on. Playing the blame game is just bad, and when it is personal blame, it's bad as well. It doesn't make it any better. So that's what I'm saying here. Like, it's complicated, but I think I got to my point here. She continues, I made my own choices, and they were horrible ones. I've accepted that. You should too. That's what I was saying as well. She has accepted it, and I did not. It's kind of fun that she answered exactly on the way, with the way that I was seeing it being answered. Glory pauses for a moment to collect herself. She looks haggard, and her pale cheeks are flushed blood red. She swallows hard and then presses forward. Anyway, one day, Harrow invited me on a field trip to Stuttgart. Even the years that I was at Feuerstel, over the years that I was at Feuerstel, the commune had easily doubled in size. It was thriving, all thanks to the efforts of Marta and the girls like her. Harrow would send the girls out to neighboring cities to lure in the street kids that nobody would miss. He targeted children because they were easy to indoctrinate, and because nothing makes the adversary happier than the corruption of the innocent. As we drove out to pick up, and again, she just mentioned the corruption of the innocent there. The notion that all I'm saying is Christianism plays the blame game close to its core. It is very, very fundamental. It's not the blame game, but the notion of sin is so fundamental to Christianism that it makes sense for her to not think in a different way, and she's definitely indoctrinated on both accounts. It's complicated because she's indoctrinated from she was indoctrinated by Harrow, but also she's seeing it from the wrong perspective, in the sense that it's from the other perspective. It's very dogmatic, is what I mean to say. As we drove out to pick up new recruits, I was already planning ahead, she says. It was a foregone conclusion that I would pay my father a visit. The irony of a group of cruise ritters getting immolated by a genuine servant of the actual devil tickled me to no end. So when Harrow stopped to fill up on diesel fuel, although people say that it's fair, but that's not correct. I hopped out of the van and headed out on foot to my parents' place. And here we see another aspect of what I was saying before. Yes, she is still being the victim of abuse here because her choices are being based on the abuse that she received as a child. Harrow wasn't overly concerned about my absence, she says. I had long since reached the point where I could assert my autonomy, and he knew that I'd be back. I wound up at my folks' house sometime around noon. I could hear the adversary whispering in my ear, telling me what to do. I had long since learned to listen to its voice. It always rewarded me with extra power when I did its bidding. It told me to knock, so I did. As the door opened, I could feel a torrent of flames welling up in the astral plane around me. It told me to channel them into the doorway, into my father. So I did. But of course, the person who opened the door wasn't my father. It was my mother. As I watched her flesh blacken and melt, as I heard her scream and I broke into hysterics, I heard the adversary laugh. And at that moment, I realized that it was laughing at me. Which again is her self-blame working. Although we're talking with actual astral demons here, and it's a little bit more textual than than just us trying to read into her own conclusions. I'm so sorry, Glory. She nods, a grim expression on her delicate face. Thanks. We're almost to the end now. Thanks for sticking with me. It was like a lever had been pulled. All at once, the bubble popped. I wasn't a powerful servant of the adversary. I was not Harrow's #1 girl. I was a ridiculous little fool who had willingly tied her soul to the worst thing in existence. Realizing all of this was one thing, actually fixing it was something else entirely. I knew that I had to get away from Harrow. That was the first thing to do. So I bit my lip, then and also this explains what her chrome is all about. That's precisely what she's saying over here. So I bit my lip and did my best to ignore the happy babble of the new recruits on the trip back to Fewerstel. And I managed to get through the ride without screaming. Once we were back at the commune, I broke into Harrow's safe, stole all of the commune's resources and ran. I don't know when Harrow realized what I had done, or whether he even cared. All that I know is that nobody came after me. So I kept running and running until I got to Berlin. Getting past the wall was fairly simple. You know how easy it is to obtain falsified papers. The biggest obstacle that I faced during my flight was the adversary itself. I could run from Harrow, but how do you run from something that's tied to your own soul? Well, I have a feeling that I know. The haunted look in Glory's eyes is heartbreaking. She gives you another curt, grim nod. I walked into the office of the first street doc I could find, pointed at all of the biggest, bulkiest pieces of cyberware that he had on display and told him to put them into me. He tried to upsell me on better merchandise, arguing that what I was asking for was old and inefficient, better suited to be installed in a museum than in a body. He told me that I'd be shredding my essence and that once it was gone, I'd never be able to get it back. I stuck to my guns. After all, shredding my essence was the whole point. She looks up at you. Her eyes are sunken and hollow, and the aura of loss around her is palpable. She looks like a woman who has been through hell. Capital H hell, which is actually the only hell that can be, because that's that's all for now, Edie, she says. You've heard the tale. You know why I am the way I am. You know the things I've done, and how much I have to atone for. If you still want my company, fine. If I've lost your friendship, I understand that too. But for now, I need to be alone. Yep. And also that little bit where she breaks and snaps out of it, that's also very familiar. And not personally, fortunately, but in the sense that it is sort of how it goes when people are indoctrinated. Anyway, that's been the story of Glory. And that's been the episode as well. I'm Colonel RPG, and this has been Shadowrun Dragonfall. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and if you did, go ahead and leave a comment. Like the video if you want to see the next episode come out sooner rather than later. But above all, thank you so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you next episode. Bye-bye.